When people picture the Bahamas, they often imagine turquoise water, white sand, and cruise ships arriving under a bright tropical sky. But the Bahamas is much more than a holiday image. Officially called the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, it is an archipelagic nation made up of hundreds of islands and thousands of smaller cays spread across a vast area of the Atlantic Ocean. Its story connects indigenous Caribbean societies, European colonization, piracy, slavery, freedom, empire, independence, and modern finance. To understand the Bahamas, you have to look beyond the beaches and see a country shaped by geography, scattered islands, open sea routes, and a strategic position between North America and the wider Caribbean world. The Bahamas lies within the Lucayan archipelago, north of Cuba and northwest of Hispaniola, the island shared today by Haiti and the Dominican Republic. It sits southeast of Florida and east of the Florida Keys, making it one of the closest Caribbean region countries to the United States. Yet technically, most of the Bahamas is not in the Caribbean Sea. It is in the Atlantic Ocean. This creates an interesting identity, geographically Atlantic, but politically, historically, and culturally part of the wider Caribbean region. The country includes around 700 islands and more than 2,500 cays, though only a portion are inhabited. Its ocean territory is enormous compared with its land area, with the Royal Bahamas Defense Force describing Bahamian territory as covering about 470,000 square kilometers of ocean space. This geography has always mattered. The islands are spread out in a chain of shallow banks, reefs, channels, and passages. For sailors, traders, colonists, and pirates, these waters could be both an opportunity and a danger. Shallow seas and hidden reefs made navigation difficult, but they also provided shelter and control points along routes between Europe, North America, and the Caribbean. The capital, Nassau, is located on New Providence, an island that became the country's political and economic center. Today Nassau is the largest city, the seat of government, and a major hub for tourism, finance, and transportation. In a country of many islands, centralization around Nassau has shaped how people, money, and influence move through national life. Long before European ships arrived, the Bahama Islands were inhabited by indigenous peoples, especially the Lucayans, a branch of the Arawakan-speaking Taino world. The Lucayans lived across the islands for many centuries, adapting to the marine environment through fishing, farming, canoe travel, and trade connections with neighboring islands. They were part of a broader indigenous Caribbean network that stretched across the Greater Antilles and beyond. Their name survives in the term Lucayan Archipelago, a reminder that these islands had a deep human history before they became known to Europeans as the Bahamas. This indigenous chapter is essential, because the first major turning point in Bahamian history was not discovery, but disruption. In 1492, Christopher Columbus made his first landfall in the Americas on an island in the Bahamas. The island is widely identified as San Salvador, which the Lucayans called Guanahani. In European history books, this moment is often described as the beginning of the so-called New World encounter. But from the Lucayan perspective, it marked the beginning of catastrophe. Spanish colonization did not turn the Bahamas into a major settlement at first. Instead, the Spanish transported many Lucayans to Hispaniola and enslaved them there. By 1513, the islands had been largely depopulated. For more than a century afterward, much of the archipelago was left sparsely inhabited or deserted, caught between imperial interest and practical neglect. The next major wave of settlement came not from Spain, but from English colonists. In 1649, a group known as the Eleutheran adventurers arrived from Bermuda and settled on the island of Eleuthera. Their name came from the Greek word for freedom, reflecting their search for religious and political autonomy. Life on the islands was difficult. The settlers faced limited resources, harsh conditions, and the challenge of building a community in a scattered maritime environment. Over time, however, English influence grew. The Bahamas became tied more closely to the British Atlantic world, a network of colonies, trade routes, plantations, ports, and naval power that connected the Caribbean with North America, Africa, and Europe. By the early 1700s, the Bahamas had gained a reputation as a haven for pirates. Its geography made it ideal for raiders, many islands, concealed anchorages, and proximity to major shipping routes. Nassau in particular became associated with piracy during what is often called the Golden Age of piracy. For imperial authorities, this was a problem. In 1718, the Bahamas became a British Crown colony as Britain moved to suppress piracy and bring the islands under firmer control. This was not only about law and order. It was about securing maritime routes, protecting trade, and making sure the islands served imperial interests rather than independent raiders. British rule reshaped the Bahamas politically and economically for centuries. Another major transformation came after the American Revolutionary War. Thousands of American loyalists, people who had supported the British Crown during the conflict, were resettled in the Bahamas. Many brought enslaved Africans with them and established plantations on land grants. This changed the demographic and social structure of the islands. From this period onward, Africans and their descendants formed the majority of the population. Plantation agriculture in the Bahamas was not as profitable or expansive as in some other Caribbean colonies, partly because of the island's soil and geography. But slavery still became central to the colony's society, wealth, labor system, and racial hierarchy. The modern population of the Bahamas cannot be understood without this history. The history of slavery in the Bahamas also includes a complex story of escape, liberation, and freedom. Britain abolished the slave trade in 1807, though slavery itself continued in the Bahamas until 1834. In 1818, the colony became recognized as a haven of manumission for enslaved Africans from outside the British West Indies. Africans liberated from illegal slave ships were resettled on the islands by the Royal Navy. Some enslaved people and Seminoles also escaped from Florida to the Bahamas, seeking freedom across the sea. Bahamians became known for recognizing the freedom of enslaved people carried by foreign ships that reached their territory. These histories helped shape a society in which Black Bahamians today make up about 90% of the population. The Bahamas remained under British rule well into the 20th century, but like many colonies, it eventually moved towards self-government and independence. In 1973, the Bahamas became an independent Commonwealth realm, separate from the United Kingdom but retaining the British monarch as head of state. Its first prime minister was Lyndon Pindling, a central figure in the country's transition to majority rule and national sovereignty. Today, King Charles III is the monarch of the Bahamas, represented locally by a governor-general. In practice, political power rests with Bahamian democratic institutions, including the elected government. This arrangement reflects the country's position within the Commonwealth, independent, self-governing, but still linked symbolically to a wider post-imperial system. Modern Bahamian identity is shaped by this mix of geography, African heritage, British institutions, and Caribbean culture. The country is a full member of the Caribbean community, known as CARICOM, which connects it to regional diplomacy, cooperation, and shared challenges. However, the Bahamas is not part of the CARICOM single market and economy, a distinction that reflects its unique economic position and policy choices. While it belongs to the Caribbean region culturally and politically, its economy has been especially tied to North American visitors, offshore finance, and Atlantic shipping routes. This makes the Bahamas both deeply Caribbean and somewhat distinct from many of its neighbors. The Bahamian economy is best known for two pillars: tourism and offshore finance. Tourism is visible everywhere, from resorts and cruise ports to beaches, diving sites, and luxury developments. The country's proximity to Florida gives it a major advantage, allowing millions of visitors to reach the islands relatively easily. Offshore finance, meanwhile, has made the Bahamas an important financial jurisdiction. Together, these sectors have helped give the country one of the highest gross domestic products per capita in the Americas. But they also bring vulnerabilities. Tourism depends on global travel, weather, and economic confidence. Island nations like the Bahamas also face serious risks from hurricanes, climate change, sea level rise, and dependence on imported goods. So the Bahamas is not just a tropical destination. It is a nation built across a vast ocean space, shaped by indigenous history, European empires, piracy, slavery, liberation, and independence. Its islands were once home to the Lucayans, then became a point of first contact between Europe and the Americas, then a British colony, a haven for pirates, a society transformed by African labor and resistance, and finally an independent Commonwealth realm. Today, it balances tourism, finance, regional identity, and environmental vulnerability. The beauty of the Bahamas is real, but its deeper story is even more powerful, a scattered Atlantic archipelago that became a modern nation with a history far larger than its landmass. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.